Right, so here we are. We're going to make this skull candle holder, which will hold tea lights. What you need to do is either make your own mould or perhaps buy a mould from the internet. I made this mould myself. It's a latex mould, and it was taken from this skull which I ordered from the internet, so I didn't make it myself. So that's a resin casted skull, and I filled in the gaps with bits of plasticine and clay. But you can either make your own skull or get a mould. I do want to make my own skull at some point, but I haven't got round to it at the moment. So anyway, what we're going to do is make this skull from plaster of Paris. So I just put the mother mould on to this skull, and we'll mix up the plaster of Paris to put into this mould. I'm going to use this mould for all sorts of things, mainly concrete skulls, but I'm going to use plaster of Paris to make up our template for another mould, which is going to be the mould for the plaster of Paris model. And of course we're going to make the tea light holder and incorporate into this cast. So first of all, we'll mix up some plaster of Paris to fill in the mould. So as always, equal volumes of plaster of Paris and water. I'll probably have to mix up a few of these jugs of plaster of Paris, because this is the biggest jugs I've got for mixing. So here goes for the first batch. So add the plaster of Paris to the water. Mix it in as you go. Right, so I'm going to pour into the latex mould now, just carefully or slowly. Right, so that's filled up. We'll just tap the side of the mould to get the air bubbles out. Right, so there we are. We'll wait for maybe an hour or maybe a little bit more, and then we can demould the plaster cast skull from the latex mould, and then we'll go on to the next stage. Right, so this has been left to set for around an hour and a half. So I'm going to demould the skull now. So as you can see, the skull's been demoulded. We can take the latex mould away and wash that for usage at another time. So now we're going to make a candle looking thing and stick that on the top of his head or her head. So we're going to simulate some kind of candle and put some drippy effects on it, and then we'll drill a hole in the top to sit the tea light. Right, so put the skull on top of an upside down plate. So hopefully that'll make it a little bit easier to work with. I've got this cardboard tube, which is a Pringles tortilla chips carton or whatever. So anything will do. I'm going to use this as a mould, and I'm going to stick that on top of the skull and pour some plaster of Paris into the tube, and that's going to act as our shape for the candle. But first I'm going to need to use a knife to fit the tube to the top of the skull, and I'll probably seal the bottom edge with some clay so that stops the plaster of Paris from seeping through the tube. So first of all, I'll cut this tube to suit. Right, so I've cut a section of the tube away from the carton, and I'm going to try and fit that as best as I can over the skull, which means trying to cut the tube to fit the contours of the top of the head, the top of the skull, while keeping it as vertical as I possibly can as well. Right, so I've done the best I can there to try and reduce the gaps around the tube and to fit that tube to the top of the head. What I'm going to do now is put some clay around the bottom just to seal the gaps. So I'll roll these up into little worms and apply that around the edge. Right, so I've secured the clay in place there to seal up those gaps. I'm going to put a bit of PVA glue just on the plaster of Paris on top of the skull, but not on the inside of the tube. So hopefully that'll give a little bit of adhesion to the new plaster of Paris that we're going to mix up in a moment. Right, so I mix up some more plaster of Paris in the same way as we did earlier. Just enough to fill inside that tube. And we'll wait again for about an hour, and then we'll come back to it. Right, so we wait about an hour, and then we can take the clay away. I will carefully remove the cardboard tube from plaster of Paris. So there we are, we're left with the plaster of Paris on the top, which obviously simulates the candle, although it doesn't look too much like a candle at the moment. Want a bit of cleaning up to do there, but before we do that, we're going to create some kind of candle wax drips with the plaster of Paris over the top of that candle template. Right, so we're going to mix up some more plaster of Paris. And for this layer of plaster of Paris, we're going to let it set to a consistency where we can drip the plaster of Paris over the top of this candle shape to create these dripping wax effects. So look a little bit cartoony. The skull looks a bit cartoony, so it's all add in with the flavour of the overall model. So just mixing up that plaster of Paris. I'll let that set a little bit so it sort of turns into a little bit of a gloopy mixture, so we can drip that over the top. Right, so we're nearly there with a gloopy consistency. And we can start pouring that over the top of this candle part and try and create some of these drips. This is going off quite quick actually. Well, that wasn't kind of the look I was going for, but I'm going to try and maybe resurrect something out of this. It's kind of a bit OTT, but you can experiment with yourself and see what happens. I think I've had this plaster of Paris hanging around for quite a long time, so it's gone off quicker than what I anticipated. So I'm going to try and make something that resembles a candle here and just hollow out this middle area. I don't even know if that looks like a candle at this stage. I'll try and tidy it up a little bit more. It's still a little bit soft, so I'll let that go hard and see if I can tidy it up a little bit. I don't know, it looks like a splodge rather than a candle, but anyway, you get the idea. Probably must be applied a little bit more runny than what I applied it, because I wanted the actual part there, the part that we made with the cardboard tube, I want more of that exposed to make it look more like a candle. But anyway, we'll see what we can do then. Right, so this has been let dry for quite some time, over a week. As you can see here, the plaster of Paris is cracked, and the reason that cracked is because I mixed water in after I'd mixed the original batch to try and keep it in a runny form. That's because my plaster's going off. You shouldn't have these problems. You just pour it down, but just don't mix in any extra water once you get going. So that's the reason for that. So what I'm going to do is fill these cracks in with some clay. And you shouldn't need to do this, but I'll put on the video anyway. So this will be like a repair job. Right, now we just want to drill a hole in the top of the candle part, just to seat this tea light candle into the top. Just need to sink it in, not very far in. So obviously got this drill bit here, which is just slightly bigger than the actual tea light candle. So here we go. Right, so that should be okay. I'll just use a knife to smoothen out these edges. And we'll also fill this little hole in with some polyfiller. I also use some polyfiller around filling in the parts which I start filling with clay. I've left this lying around for a little bit, so it's probably noticed the difference in the video quality from the last video footage. So there we go, I'm just going to put this polyfiller in that hole. And the next step is we'll give it a prime. I'm going to use some white spray paint, primer spray paint, so that'll help the layers of paint stick to the top of the skull on top of the primer. Right, so we put the primer spray undercoat on, and I put a couple of layers of that on, and now I'm just going to put an undercoat layer all over the model. So that's going to be a mixture of black and orange, just to give a kind of brown looking effect. You can use brown, just straight brown, burnt umber. I think I'm running out of burnt umber. Okay, I won't go into too much depth about the painting in this particular video. There's other painting effects videos on the channel, so you can have a look at those, and there'll be more to come as well. So I'll get this to a relatively decent standard, and then that will be ready for making a latex mould and then casting further reproductions of this particular skull. So anyway, I'll get on with it and continue painting. Okay, so there we are, job done, and what I'll probably do is put a bit of clear lacquer over the top of that, and then that'll be ready for making a latex mould. And of course, like I said before, obviously make some concrete casts out of them and make quite a few copies. Right, so I'm going to get a candle and let's see what it looks like.